The intersection of endurance sport, health, fitness, and life. Challenging conventional ideas and empowering people with the science of self-propelled motion. This is the Endurance Experience Podcast, hosted by Tony Rich.
Welcome to the Endurance Experience Podcast. This is Tony Rich. I am binging all of the Olympic results over the last few days. There are some amazing stories that have come out of the Olympics and some controversial ones as well. I hope to try to, over the next week and a half, try to get someone to come on to talk about some of the highlights from the Olympics and just sort of do a post-Olympic review. More to come on that in the coming days. My guest today on this podcast is Dirk Friel. You might know that name. He is one of the co-founders of the training and nutrition software TrainingPeaks. It's the software that many of us coaches utilize to train athletes, Olympic coaches, Tour de France coaches, and many industry professionals use it to train and coach athletes. And you might know him from his famous father, Joe Friel, author of several books, including the Cyclist Training Bible, and the one that really set the foundation for me to go into coaching, the Triathlete's Training Bible. It took me into new direction with the science of self-propelled motion. In 2023, Escape Collective named Dirk one of the top 50 influential people in American cycling. Dirk also hosts the TrainingPeaks podcast CoachCast, an excellent endurance sports podcast where he highlights the value of coaching, training, as well as exploring topics with guests. I highly recommend it. I'll put the link in the show notes. I wanted this podcast to appeal to, first and foremost, coaches. So if you're a coach who trains and coaches athlete and otherwise interested in the technical and personal approach of coaching, you're going to like this podcast, but also the athlete that's on the other side of the coaching process. You'll get something out of this podcast too. And so we talk about Dirk's origin story and his emergence into the world of cycling, and the origin of TrainingPeaks and all the work that he and his father, Joe Friel, did to get TrainingPeaks off of the ground and launch TrainingPeaks into orbit. With all of the increased awareness of AI today, we spend a healthy part of the conversation talking about AI, and I get Dirk's opinion about AI, how TrainingPeaks will keep pace with AI and competitors using AI, given that there's such a heightened awareness on AI taking jobs. I get Dirk's perspective on the prospect that AI might take or completely eliminate the need for a coach. That was an interesting exchange. Additionally, we go into how the technology has and will continue to refactor the entire coaching business. We get into the training part of the discussion, and I get Dirk's perspective on training and key pillars that he adheres to with training and coaching athletes. Aerobic versus intensity. We talk a little about periodization, base, build, peak, tutor, bumper framework. We go into some of the common cognitive errors that athletes often make with their training as well as their recovery process, and many other topics related to training. And then finally, we end and talk about wearable technology, and I get his perspective on who's going to win the wearable technology war and other topics. So, without further delay, I will give you Dirk Friel. I am on with Dirk Friel. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. Thanks for inviting me on. It should be fun.
Yeah. I've known of Dirk for a long time, and of course his dad, the famous Joe Friel, and he was, probably sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, where I found the Triathlete's Training Bible.
Yeah.
Famous book by Joe Friel. And that book just took me into new direction. And so I'm 20 years since starting endurance sports. I started coaching in 2011. And it was your dad's book that really was one of the things that took me into new direction. It was pretty incredible. It was like discovery of training science and what I call the science of self-propelled motion.
Yeah.
And then you and your dad co-founded TrainingPeaks.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things that I want to talk to you about today for our listeners. I want to talk about TrainingPeaks and your background and your origin story, the evolution of TrainingPeaks over the years. And, for someone who doesn't know what TrainingPeaks is, it's the ultimate of training and nutrition software. So I want to get your understanding of how it evolved over the years. And then I want to talk about AI. Everyone's talking about AI and how TrainingPeaks is going to factor in modalities of AI and maintaining pace with the competitive landscape in AI. And then I want to talk some training, get some training questions in there, and then talk about things like wearable tech and where you think wearable tech is going. So let's start with your origin story. If you can describe to our listeners your origin and your background and where that has led you today.
Yeah, well, it literally goes back to when I was 12 years old or even before. I mean, literally, it was just our family DNA of growing up in northern Colorado and living around endurance sports. My dad was a track and field coach. He ended up leaving, high school teaching and bought a running store. So now we had a running store selling shoes to runners, marathoners. We had all kinds of great, talented national class athletes that worked for my father and just debated scientific training methods within the store. And we're talking 1980s. And then my dad eventually bought a bike shop and made it one. And it was ahead of its time and failed, but it was the first triathlon store, I believe, in the United States in Fort Collins, Colorado. It was called Foot of the Rockies. And literally, I just grew up in that environment. So I was a runner primarily, I guess you might say, in middle school, as much as you are a runner in middle school. But then this new sport of triathlon was coming along, and I thought I might dabble in that. But once I started training, I just realized I just love the bike. It's all about the bike. And there was a bike race coming up in the fall in my town. And so I just full bore started training for this criterium. And I got last place, but I was in love from age 12 on till this day. I've done a bike, I raced bikes for all those decades since. And it never left just my passion for the sport, primarily cycling.
Right.
So then along the way, obviously my father starts writing books, writing for, Velo News and many, many other magazines. And he developed this book. And at the same time, I literally dropped out of school when I was 19, dropped out of college, and I got a one-way ticket to Belgium. And I just wanted to try and make it as a pro in Europe. So I was in Europe for 5 years. I did 3 years amateur and 2 years pro. I came back at the end of the 1994 season and finished out my pro cycling career. I retired in 2002. So the remaining part of my career was back in the States, still traveling internationally. And in 97, I started coaching with my father. He was already pretty well-established coach. By this time, he had sold his retail stores and he was coaching full-time. And he was maybe one of 3 full-time coaches in the United States. If you take out all the collegiate coaches that, coach cross-country running, track and field, et cetera, a for-profit coaching business just did not exist, for triathletes and runners. And he was one of the first. So I started coaching with him in 97 in the family business. And then I quickly realized how inefficient it was. We were quite literally relying on the fax machine and email attachments. And we would send schedules out either via paper, via the fax machine, or email attachment, the spreadsheet. And then hopefully coming back Sunday night in the home office is a pile of paper under the fax machine with all the training journals from that previous week. And you'd have to siphon through it, or you would get, quite a few emails every single day with everything from a .hrm file for Polar to a .csv file from a PowerTap to a .srm file from an SRM and other file formats. And you'd have to open up all these different desktop software applications to open and render and analyze. And it was so inefficient. And here we are now going into the year 1999. And I was like, hey, Dad, there's this thing called the internet. This could really maybe streamline our family business and not only make our jobs as coaches easier, more efficient, but the quality of service that we could deliver to our athletes would exponentially go up. And it did. Like overnight, the athletes loved it. We loved it as coaches. So we along came actually, I got married, and best man at my wedding and an ex-teammate was Gear Fisher. And he had a day job. He was a web developer, and he's the only web developer I knew in the entire world. And so I had this idea of, creating what became TrainingPeaks. Neither my father and I really knew how to wire that up. We weren't the technologists. And so luckily I had gear, and I pitched it to him, and we worked late nights, starting in 99, and we went live in 2000. So that's really the origin story. And one cool little story behind that is he was living up near Vail, Colorado, and Gear's real name is George Fisher, George Arthur Fisher, kind of condensed it into Gear, George Arthur into Gear. And there's a bar that still exists up in Vail called The George, and Gear's name is George. And my father's actual real name is George. So we had a beer in The George, and I pitched him on this concept, and he said yes. So that bar still exists and still does, and TrainingPeaks still exists. So that's our origin story.
That's interesting. I never knew Gear Fisher was your best man.
Yeah. And so we started this, .com right as the .com was busting. But we didn't have a business plan. We didn't have an investor. We didn't accrue any debt. We call it bootstrapping or sweat equity, if you will. And that's literally how it got going. Right.
And then did you have subject matter experts? How did people like Hunter Allen and Andy Coggan, how were they involved?
Yeah, well, as the power meters started to penetrate the market and the cycling market, really US-based masters athletes really took to it. And many of these masters athletes were, had a scientific background. So Andy Coggan, hence But there were these forums, and a lot of great ideas were formulated through these kind of think tanks, if you will, at the time. This is maybe, this is around the year 2004 timeframe when this kind of started getting kicked off. And it was funny because it was very opposite of Europe. Many of the European World Tour de France cycling teams, had SRMs, but they really weren't leveraging them. They were just like status symbols.
Yeah.
But really getting to know the numbers, how to apply them, and creating new metrics, that really originated really by and far from US based masters athletes on forums. And so we were obviously part of those forums, and we commercialized those ideas and brought them to the masses, if you will, through TrainingPeaks. Outside of that, obviously our primary customer base are coaches.
Right.
And so when you think about subject matter experts, it's really the voice of the customer, both our coaches and athletes, but we're really about helping motivated individuals prepare for events through structured training. We believe in deliberate practice. You set a goal, get expert instruction, have focused practice, and get immediate feedback. And that's both at a daily, immediate basis, but, weekly, monthly, mesocycle, year over year, preparing for the Olympics is a long process. So that's really at the heart of TrainingPeaks, is deliberate practice and helping people prepare for events that are, get on the calendar in the future. So it's not about who did you beat today, but who are you going to beat in the future? How are you going to beat them?
Yeah. And, like I mentioned, when I first discovered it, and then I discovered the Triathlete Training Bible, I said, wow, it really focused me. It was like in the Matrix, when, at the end of the Matrix, when Neo realizes he can see in the Matrix. That's what it was like. It was,
right.
It was, I realized, swimming, cycling, running, getting faster is really, stems from the same scientific principles or similar scientific principles. And then TrainingPeaks just, it put a system to it.
Right.
And all those files that you have on your computer and everything like that, those were, no longer necessary, or substantially less necessary. There was actually a system and a calendar and a dashboard that rolled it all up. Yeah. So let's talk there about how it evolved over the years. I mean, I can remember some of the earlier iterations, which are now foggier in my mind. But how did it evolve, and how did you get that input? You talked a little bit about the crowdsourcing approach. How did it evolve?
Yeah, well, obviously crowdsourcing is a major part of it. Getting voice of customer from the coaches and athletes helps in large part, define the roadmap going forward. But certainly as a founder, it's always frustrating because no matter what, you always see a product that's 3 or 5 years out, in your head, and you can't develop fast enough. That's always kind of the joy in it as well, because it still feels like a startup, because there's endless, it's ever evolving. It's never, ever, ever over. It's technology. You can't say there's an end game, just like athletes, there can be an end game, but yet you evolve as an athlete through your entire life cycle. And hopefully you end up as a master's athlete, very healthy and having a rich history behind you, and you still have goals ahead of you. And that's the same thing with us. We may be 25 years old now, but in no way are we settling for where we're at. There's so much more to do, and it's really fun and exciting. This technology, again, it feels like it creates more and more opportunities every year. Yeah. But that's good. It's there are so many opportunities that there's no way that we're going to pursue them all, right? We have to know who we are, and it's, there's hard lessons along the way. You have to learn when to say no, and you say no a lot more than you say yes in terms of opportunities. We've never taken an ad dollar in our entire history. We've been a pay for SaaS service application from day one, but we've had many people wanting to advertise through us. But we knew if we took an ad dollar from Adidas, then if your coaching group is sponsored by Nike, that would kind of piss you off, right? So so there's some fundamentals along the way that help us decide when to say yes, but we say no a lot more than yes, and just try and focus in. There's a lot that's developed on the coach side that the athlete never sees. And so if it makes the coach more efficient in the end, it helps the athlete.
Yeah.
So certainly, being able to plan by groups, I mean, you're talking in the last decade, but, being able to, if you have a group of 25 female triathletes and they meet every Wednesday at 5:00, you can plan those group sessions out. You just click and drag that session onto Wednesday and it'll add it to all 25. Now the athlete never sees that, but the coach loves that feature, right? A lot of notifications. There are many different coaching service models which can exist within a coaching business that uses TrainingPeaks. Some coaches want large numbers of athletes that pay a lower amount per month, and they're more group coaching, and they can do that in TrainingPeaks. Some coaches only sell training plans. They actually don't do hands-on coaching. They do a great job of selling training plans. And then on the other end of the spectrum we have every single Tour de France cycling team in this year's race. They all manage all of the training through TrainingPeaks. The USA Triathlon, we have 35 national governing bodies that are going to the Olympics here in Paris. So all the way from the gold medalists and Tour de France winners, all the way across the board to beginners. And so on that high touch, premium level coaching, coaches can leverage TrainingPeaks as well. And it can be a notification system. So if you're coaching this athlete that's paying a higher dollar amount per month, it's worth giving them a high level of service. So therefore, when they finish their workout, you might have, as a coach, post-workout notifications turned on. You immediately get a notification that athlete has completed a workout. The coach can literally stop what they're doing in the dentist office and look at the workout on their mobile device and quickly get back to the athlete with post-workout, feedback. And that's really valuable. And it's not just for Olympians or Tour de France athletes. There's every age athlete out there should experience this, because it's so empowering to have that person in your corner. And you can only relate to that one person about today's workout. Oftentimes you can't relate that feeling with your spouse. Your spouse may not even know anything about your sport. But you're getting that feedback from your coach. You have a great conversation about today's workout. You learn a thing or two from it that can get applied to tomorrow's workout. There's a lot of ins and outs in terms of managing communication that people don't really see or consider, that we've developed.
Yeah, for the coach, the ability, the capability to develop, the landing pages, custom landing pages. And now I think later on, coaches started creating landing pages and doing that. Yeah. And I said, well, welcome to the game. TrainingPeaks has been doing this, providing us with the ability to create custom landing pages, custom training programs, publishing,
unique URLs,
URLs.
And promotional codes. You can create promo codes and distribute those. So it's sort of like the Shopify, if you will, versus the Amazon. It's more about empowering your coach brand within your own world, and trying to become more and more seamless. We have more business solutions to come out with to even become better in that area. Again, that's never going to end, but there's definitely more opportunity on that business side of empowering coaches to be the Shopify of the coaching world.
Right. Excellent. So let's talk about AI, and I'm
Yeah.
curious to know what you think about
Yeah.
AI, and it's getting a great deal of visibility. And, obviously there are people on all sides of the spectrum that say it will have varying different degrees of impact on the fitness, training, and coaching landscape. So I'm sure you've been thinking about this, your team has been thinking about this. How is Training Peaks going to keep up with the march of AI? And of course, competitors will come out with their versions. So how is Training Peaks going to keep pace?
Yeah. Obviously, it's already out there. It's a strange time. We're certainly not at a tipping point yet. However, it might sound like it. There's somewhat of a bubble, if you will, going on, a lot of hype around it.
Mm-hmm.
But from day one until today, we really look at what are the best doing, how are they doing it, and how can we bring that to the masses? But in a very sound, methodical, authentic way.
Right.
So unfortunately, the AI talk today, unfortunately, it's sort of like a race to the bottom. So it's like promise the world for $15 a month. And literally like, this is the best thing going for $15 a month. You don't need a coach. And that is not the case. I think if you look at, again, all these athletes that are going to Paris for the Olympics, they're not relying on AI to tell them what to do tomorrow. It's just not there. The Tour de France riders are not relying on AI to decide what to do tomorrow to prepare for the Tour de France. It's not ready. It's not there. But having said all that, AI is here to stay, and it's only going to get better. Okay, let's put aside all the bad, negative stuff about AI. Let's just talk about, the positive stuff. It's absolutely going to be a game changer, and it is here to stay, and it will affect, endurance athletes. And eventually, like all endurance athletes that want to podium will be leveraging some aspect of AI, right? But I believe in the Training Peaks world, we're, as always, with every single thing we've done, we kind of start through the coach's view. And so where can AI help a coach be faster or make a better decision in the moment?
Right.
And so that's where it's going to start. We're investigating that, but it's not like prime time ready or anything, but that's certainly where we will start. I believe right now by giving an open-ended chat bot to athletes is somewhat disingenuous, because by definition, the athlete doesn't even know the proper question to ask. Right. So if they start asking the wrong question, they go down the wrong rabbit hole and they become to some conclusion that really has nothing to do with like what they're looking to solve. There's a million different ways to solve the same problem, right? And each individual is unique. So ideally, if you have, 5 athletes training for the same event, they all weigh the same, they're all the same age, they're all females, you're still going to train them differently. In the ideal world, they will be trained differently for that same event, because they come to the table with a unique set of parameters: physiology, mental state, nutrition, sleep, activity, stress at home, stress at work. Like that's where we start. So how do we solve for that solution? And AI will come in and play a part. It's not ready right now for that. But it's going to help coaches for sure in terms of analysis and coming to better conclusions quicker at the individual level. I also don't believe in one coaching methodology. Even though my father wrote the Cyclist Training Bible, Triathletes Training Bible, etc., he has his methodology, but that is not the methodology for all of our coaches. and you might have 30,000 plus different coaching methodologies, all practiced within TrainingPeaks. So how is one AI solution going to fit into those different methodologies? You know, one coach believes in a high fat diet, one coach believes in a high protein diet, another believes in a high carb diet, and
Right.
et cetera. There's so many variations, not only just in diet, but in training, and how you adapt the training to the athlete. And then obviously each athlete has a different profile of recovery, which AI will come and play a part in. But right now you can really get a sense of how well an athlete is recovering through post-workout comments, through phone calls, through having coffee with them, seeing a Zoom conversation with them, and how they look, you know, and
Right.
just their mood comes through. And the other part of it is motivation. You know, there's some level of motivation you can gain from AI. But if you finish a workout and your human coach says, "Hey, great job, but that third interval, you went out way too hard. Let's work on that next week. But hey, great job on today's workout." Like, you're going to get this inner kind of fuzzy feel that's really good and motivating to help you improve, versus maybe the very same message from AI, but you just know it's not a human on the other end, and you can't really have that human interaction and human contact. That's very, very different in terms of, it might push the athlete farther on race day, knowing there's an actual human on the other end that's helping them along in that journey, which is so much more powerful than an AI bot.
Yeah.
So I don't believe human coaching will go away, but I believe AI will help the human coach do a better job of coaching the individual.
Yeah. And it may happen by incremental degrees. I mean,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I've seen, well, when I first started coaching, I started coaching in 2011. And then, you know, even I had a lot of things that I had personally developed, templates,
Yeah.
whether they be Excel templates or PowerPoint templates, things that help me, customize information for athletes. And then as things got better, the wearable tech got better, TrainingPeaks got better, I realized I needed those templates less and less.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. There's no secret workout. There's no secret training program. The more you get into the world of coaching, you realize there's more and more, like, if you train, 2 hours a day, it's the other 22 hours in the day that almost matter more.
Mhm.
And how you structure your life, the stress around it, how you recover. Do you need strength training? Do you need to make tweaks to your diet? Do you need even a sports psychologist? There's a lot of anxiety within endurance athletes. And so, just tapping into something that may actually be outside of the day's workout might actually unleash better results than the actual workout that's prescribed, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the more, and we're seeing that within TrainingPeaks, where we're seeing more and more of like teams that surround the athlete. So certainly that's been done at the Olympic level for, over a decade, but an athlete can be working with a sports dietitian, sports psychologist, a strength coach. Not every coach that's a triathlon coach is an expert in strength. So if that's what the athlete really needs, maybe they should work with a strength coach. But the head coach in the middle, can oversee the entire holistic program. So we're kind of seeing that, where athletes in TrainingPeaks can be shared to other coaches, which have their own areas of expertise, and they're working as a team on behalf of that athlete. And again, that's not just at the Olympic movement, but that's many masters athletes, are able to take advantage of that as well. And it just helps them with their quality of life too,
Yeah. And then of course the best coaches are going to be the one to add the value, to add that sort of meta oversight.
Yeah.
And the coaches that can't those are the ones that will probably be more likely to be replaced by an AI, where you wake up in 20 years from now and, an athlete will be able to say, okay, let me go into the AI model that's taken in all my data from various different sources, my health data, my actual training data, and, spit out a program for Boston Marathon or something like
Yeah.
that.
I believe the younger, newer you are to a sport, the more a training plan or quote AI can be of benefit. The longer you're in the sport, the better you get, the higher your goals. You want to get out of a rut. You hit a plateau. That's where the human coach can really make the breakthroughs for you.
And it affects the
Absolutely.
coaching business too. I talked to a number of different coaches now, TrainingPeaks coaches, USAT coaches, and people are realizing that they have to work harder
Yeah.
to reap the same coaching revenue
Yeah.
that they were able to get previously, because there are so many substitutes out in the market.
That's the same in every single career path ever.
Yeah.
The first plumber didn't have to do a whole lot, right?
Right.
The ante just gets up, higher and higher. But yet technology also creates new career paths and new, like, narrow niches, that to define a career within. But with every new generation, the ante gets higher and higher and higher. But we all want that, Again, the profession of endurance coaching and triathlon, cycling, running, or as a for-profit business, is less than 20 years old. Like, we're still very new at this.
Right.
So you should expect, like, it to, in a way, get harder just because the competition levels up. It's harder to podium in your age group in any endurance sport today than it was 20 years ago. That's just how it works, right? So that can't be a contentious area. It's just like, hey, this is how it's growing, and it's just harder to be an endurance athlete if you have lofty goals. But you can streamline things and coach a lot of athletes with a lot of great AI tools as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about that and dive into some of the training discussion.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that how it's getting very difficult for athletes to compete. I mean, people want to qualify for 70.3 Worlds, Ironman, World Championship, Boston Marathon. I have a lot of Boston Marathon athletes now. If you want to qualify for the Boston Marathon and you're a male, you basically, in your 20s and 30s, you basically have to train sub 3-hour marathon in your 20s and 30s. And then, the women's qualifying times are just 30 minutes south of that.
Yeah. So
what are your core ideas of training that you cling to? There's higher intensity versus aerobic. There's indoor versus outdoor. There's a lot of indoor virtual cycling training going on. Volume is king. People swear by volume is king. So what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think of it as a hierarchy of needs, and there's a base level of things that need to just be taken care of before you can go to the higher level analysis, application of whatever it might be. People are talking about altitude training and heat training, but if you just have horrible sleep, like, forget it. Like, don't worry about heat training. Don't worry about altitude training. Focus on getting good sleep. That's almost like the number one thing at all. After that is like consistency. How many days, how many sessions do you do a week? Is it 2? Okay, make it a goal of 3 or 4. Okay, now you're up to a standard level, let's say. Okay, well, do you still have good sleep? It's sort of like this ebb and flow back and forth. And this, you start with the base layer of the hierarchy of needs of like, what is fundamental? Obviously, nutrition, sleep, consistency. Those like where you have to start. If you have a major hole in any of those, it doesn't matter what you do above that.
Right.
And then above that, I mentioned sometimes it's the things outside of the workout that are holding you back more than the actual workout execution itself. So again, that might be nutrition. It might be stress, work-life balance, those type of things. Oftentimes, if you can figure out that thing, it'll just unleash a whole new you,
right,
with no change in training at all. But you can now have more work capacity because you only have 2 drinks of alcohol a week now and not 10, or you have much better quality sleep consistently, right? Again, if we can get all that in order, that kind of holistic view, then you start to get into, okay, are you tracking the data? Like if you are just training on feel, day-to-day feel, with no kind of third-party guidance, neutral support, guidance, you might be missing a big piece. It might be in your pacing strategy. It might be in that you do too much intensity. As you said, volume might be better, right? But I see too many athletes that are doing the virtual race series 2 or 3 days a week indoors on whatever app, right?
right.
And they artificially create this plateau that they can't break through. Why? They do too much intensity. They don't have a coach that's helping them have perspective on their training intensity distribution. So to even answer that question, you must track your training. It's so easy. Like it's free in TrainingPeaks. Hit stop on your Garmin, Suunto, whatever it is, Apple Watch. It'll shuttle the TrainingPeaks for free and it'll be there. But then if you get a consultation with a coach or hire a coach on an ongoing basis, they now have a rich history of data and they're going to see something in there that's really going to help you out. And it might just be timing. Like you're doing too much intensity in November, but your real race is in July, right. And training is not linear. It's modulated. Like another word for it is periodized, but think of it more modulated in terms of the intensities and the volumes, etc. So that it might take a few cycles. You can't have the expectation in year 1 of triathlon to go to Kona or Nice. So it might take a few cycles, a few seasons of collecting this data and then seeing the trends in the data to unlock the secrets. Also, too many athletes focus on the individual workout as if that's going to determine everything.
Right.
But it is really the consistency over time that wins out. And that matters much, much more than did you do 4 or 6 intervals today? In the scheme of things, that doesn't matter at all. It's just, did you get out and do the workout? And are you doing that every single week? And that consistency over time will build on itself. And this is a little bit of a downer, but good sound training is boring. There is no super secret sauce, but the secret comes into the individualization of that boring training.
Right.
So yes, you have to do this workout, many times, or yes, you need to do 3 hours of zone 2. And I don't want you to go over 145 heart rate, but I know the group ride is going to go fast. Just get dropped. Like you can maybe start with a group ride, or maybe you can't, like you can't hold yourself back. But today's governor is below 145 heart rate. That's boring, but once you see the effects of that, or I just randomly said 145, but the point is, that aerobic conditioning takes time. There is no quick high intensity interval training that's going to fix that.
Right. Right. And so many things there that just jog my memory as a coach, just because there's so many athletes that I sat down with who, they get to the start of the metaphorical hike and they just want to bound to the summit in one leap.
Yeah.
And it's talking them down from that. You go one landing, then get to the next landing, then get to the next landing. That takes time to build, right? To the bumper, base, build, peak. And too many athletes, they just want to buy the next hot new gadget.
But yeah, it's addicting. You can actually make great progress. You can make very quick, fast progress by doing a lot of intensity, but it's very short-lived. It's not going to last, or you'll hit that plateau and not break through. But your actual potential as an athlete is much higher than what you're allowing yourself to reach.
Yeah. And with Ironman athletes, one of the chronic conditions is swim neglect. Swim neglect. Swim neglect is one where I just want to do one session a week, right? Can't win in the swim, right? That's what we've been told. But also things like strength, right? So a new long course athlete will think, well, I'm swimming, cycling, and running. Don't I need 5 hours a week in functional strength? They're thinking about it in terms of a bifurcated. This stuff is cardiovascular, and this stuff is strength. I'm constantly trying to bring them down and go, okay, those things strengthen your body too. Swimming, cycling, and running strengthens your body.
Yeah. My dad is 80, and I think the older you get, the more strength training you do need in your program, but he only lifts a little bit every single day.
Yeah.
And that can really help maintain muscle. So, it's and everybody's unique in terms of their injury history or prehab. Injury prevention is a big part of this, and it's not just squatting. Squat is a great exercise, but these dynamic movements with some element of power or speed in them. But then you have to be very careful because that could cause injury. So it's like having the right expert to work with and get that kind of comprehensive analysis, movement patterns prior to going into a program is pretty powerful.
So you're thinking, you're trying to build a house. Every workout, don't think about every workout. Every workout is a brick in the house.
Oh, yeah. My other analogy is like a painter, but every single day you get one brush stroke. So it's like purple today, yellow tomorrow, red. Okay, back to purple, red, yellow. But you just get one stroke a day.
Right.
And at the end of the 2 years, what have you built? What have you painted? What self-portrait have you created? You only got one little swatch a day, of that paintbrush. And that's what training is.
Yeah.
And if you do too much red, it's just going to be like, it might be ugly. I don't know. It might be pretty. We'll find out.
Yeah. I like that one. I think I might borrow that. So let's finally talk about the wearable tech. I've seen over 20 years the wearable tech evolve significantly. Who do you think is going to win the wearable tech wars? Now, TrainingPeaks syncs with just about every wearable tech out there.
I don't know. I hope there's multiple winners because there's different types of folks looking for different things. I read a review today of the new Suunto watch, and why won't I buy it? Because it doesn't have pay. I can't go to my gas station and pay with it. But you know what? My Garmin, I can. Like I went to Europe without credit cards, and all I had was my Garmin watch, and I didn't need credit cards. I just used my Garmin watch, but I can't do that with Suunto. The point is, there's like each person has their thing that they, no one device has everything. Yeah. Again, the Suuntos of the world and the Garmin's of the world have an edge right now on Apple because it's just form factor, battery life, just
Correct.
It's just like the interval settings. I can track kilojoules. I can track TSS on my Garmin. I can't do that on my Apple Watch. And those things are really important to me, And so, okay, Apple Watch may introduce that. TSS, KJ, whatever. And then there's going to be the next thing. So I feel that there's room in the marketplace for multiple winners, if you will. Certainly there's the big dog Apple, and they're doing a great job. Every year they become better and better for the endurance athlete. You can now pair your power meter, with your Apple Watch. That's a big breakthrough. You can consume your TrainingPeaks workout of the day on Apple Watch, and that was a big breakthrough 8 months ago or whatever that was. So it's shaping, moving very fast. But I do hope there's absolute room for multiple winners, if you will, because there's so many different use cases. Even within endurance, there's people that want to summit Mount Everest, and an Apple Watch is not going to do. You can't, like, I can take my sport watch into the sauna, but my Apple Watch will give out.
That's
so
interesting.
Like, there's just extreme cases where Apple does not work, right? But maybe for that athlete, that's really important. I don't want to switch my watch just because I finished my workout, just to put on a trendy looking watch, right? But for the majority of the marketplace, like, Apple's perfect. Like, they don't need it to work above 18,000 feet when it's negative 20 degrees,
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm one of those guys that wear two watches. I have my Garmin charging, and then I had an Apple Watch Ultra.
Yeah.
And I mean, mainly out of curiosity, I thought, see where Apple's going. And you're right. Apple is just not there yet for the endurance athlete. The battery life, for one, and some of the other features. But Apple has really good med tech. Their medical technology is really good, right? The fact that it could detect, it'll detect something like atrial fibrillation or.
One thing that's interesting is that new Apple iOS coming out, I think it's 18, will have satellite messaging. And so right now I pay Garmin for InReach. I pay them a monthly subscription for my satellite messaging for when I ski or I go off grid for a huge mountain bike ride or something.
Yeah.
But if the Apple phone, iOS 18 or whatever it is good enough, then I'm going to cancel my Garmin InReach subscription. So, but I'm still going to wear maybe a Garmin for my workout. But so it's sort of like they go back and forth on even different. It's not just about the watch, but the cyclometer, the cycling computer, and then your phone capabilities. And so that it's a suite of products for surrounding each individual. And some like Android better than Apple, right? So there's a whole other set of questions, circumstances around Android. So again, like, multiple winners, and how do they work with each other?
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. I think Garmin should be looking at Apple and going, oh, they should be shaking in their boots, because once someone comes out with a total solution where you don't need to walk around like me with two watches, then that watch will pull away from the rest. I had the original. There was Timex used to make. You probably remember. They made this Timex body link system. It was a watch.
I had it.
Huge backpack.
I had
that. And then I got that. I don't know, that must have been, I don't know, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And then Garmin came along and just took that out back and shot it. It just killed it.
Yeah. No, I had one of those, and we actually developed the Timex software that came in the box.
I remember that with the
exactly. So we were beholden to Timex for quite a few years, but things change a lot. Garmin bought Ant Plus and kind of opened up the world, whereas prior to that, Suunto and Polar were very closed, a closed system. and not open. And now they've been forced to open up. The .fit files are so just, it's a commodity now, so it makes it more and more accessible. Like I said earlier, TrainingPeaks, you can get a free version and upload your Garmin watch all day long to it, right? And that's just a commodity now.
Awesome. Well, so before we finish up, can you give us a little nugget about anything coming with TrainingPeaks? Anything new? Any new nuggets?
I'm sure most listeners haven't seen this, but it's out, but it's still under beta tag. But our strength solutions, our new strength solutions. I don't know if you've seen it, but coaches can now prescribe set rep weight along with video. So we have a video library of over 1,000 videos from squat to lunge to Romanian, whatever, and coaches can actually upload and create their own custom video libraries of strength training exercises.
Incredible.
So even if you have a warm-up routine, you could shoot a quick video, upload that to your TrainingPeaks coach account, and then leverage that with your athletes for like warm-up routines, prehab, cool down, roller. It doesn't have to be just gym based. So that is a really big thing that we're rolling out now. And it also opens up the capability for strength coaches to actually get in there and work with the head coach to plan the strength component. And then the head coach can see what the strength coach is programming, and the strength coach can see the overall training program and where the races are, where the big load phases are, so they can modulate, the strength training to accommodate. So working in harmony between head coach and strength coach, I'd say that's a big one. And then also recently, we've launched quite a few API partnerships, in particular with nutrition apps. So Fuel In, Food Coach, Hexus. These are apps that will actually pull data from TrainingPeaks, so your completed workout data, and they can see your future training or racing, like tomorrow's workout data, and then they'll render back to TrainingPeaks nutrition plan. If you have a nutritionist, I believe Hexus can actually has an or an app interface for nutritionists, so they can customize the individual. But that all syncs with TrainingPeaks. So a lot of new stuff on the strength side and the nutrition side, and it's kind of just the beginning. Like that's just the beta launch, kind of seeded versions. And again, in my head, it's 5 generations out already, but that'll keep building on one another. So yeah, that's kind of two big things right now that we've been working on.
Wow, I'm excited about those. More and more.
Check it out.
You're taking away all the stuff that I had to do manually. I love it.
Well, it's hopefully better quality service for the athlete in the end, and they can just go to the gym with their phone or their swim workout or bike or whatever it is. So it's all never ending, right?
Right.
It's gonna be fun.
Awesome. So where can people find you? Where can people find CoachCast, the CoachCast podcast?
Well, I mean, on TrainingPeaks, there's a resource center that has the podcast kind of linked to CoachCast. Obviously, just type in CoachCast in Spotify or whatever. Do a monthly, try and bring experts in, and can you learn a thing or two you can apply to your training tomorrow type thing. And then I don't do Facebook or Twitter, but I'm on Instagram. So Instagram/Dirk Friel is where I post. So yeah, that's easy.
Right. And you athletes that haven't signed up yet, free account, trainingpeaks.com, the ultimate training and nutrition software. All right. Thanks, Dirk Friel. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. The links to Dirk Friel's Instagram are in the show notes, as well as the links to CoachCast and the links to TrainingPeaks. You can go and get a free account if you haven't yet gotten a free account on TrainingPeaks. So go ahead and do that if you are training, swimming, cycling, running, rowing, doing functional strength. All of it is available on TrainingPeaks with a free account. You can sync your wearable technology, whatever you're using, Apple Watch, Garmin, Polar, all of them, every single wearable technology can be synced with TrainingPeaks, including your Garmin Smart Scale or some other smart scale that you're using, as well as some other third-party nutrition platforms. And if you're a triathlete or marathon runner and you want to get deep into the science of self-propelled motion, do what I did some 20 years ago now and pick up the Triathlete's Training Bible by Dirk's father, Chief Friel. I still have my edition here. Still highlighted, still dog-eared, underlined. I kept going back to it and basically used it as a reference more than something that you just sit down and read from cover to cover. It's more of a reference. But you'll end up over time going through almost all of it, if not all of it. I'm a data and science centric coach. And there's one thing for sure, that TrainingPeaks is the industry leader in this space. And for years to come, it's unlikely that any competitor is going to outrun them in this space, given the economies of scale that they've built with the platform. So I expect to see some new features, as Dirk alluded to. Well, it's time for me to go binge on some more Olympics. It's the second week. Okay. Thanks for listening. This is the Endurance Experience Podcast.
Follow Event Horizon Endurance Sport on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter for training programs and services. To become a member of our Endurance Institute or for a complete archive of podcasts, log on to our website, eventhorizon.tv.